Why does contract management matter? What are we trying to achieve when we talk about contract management? Contract management should make more money and reduce risk. The benefits of contract management typically fall into two big buckets. And whatever you read and think about in terms of justifying contract management, these are the two major buckets to think about categorizing those arguments. The first is process improvement. We will become more efficient, a better utilization of staff and resources, and we will reduce risk, that is, unexpected losses from contracts. These two ideas are on the left, we're taking process improvement changes and hopefully building a straighter line between the top of that contract process to the end of that contract process. Many organizations have an undocumented, undefined contracting process, and it goes all over the place. We want to draw a straight line, or as straight a line as possible, between the contract and its effective management to the end. Versus the risk management approaches, where we are worried mostly that the organization will go off of the cliff for some reason. So this might mean that the other party breaches a contract that we don't want them to breach. We might inadvertently breach the contract ourselves and want to manage that. Or there might be provisions of our contracts which are unenforceable that we're counting on that we won't be able to enforce. There might be pricing escalation terms that we aren't aware of and don't manage. There might be obligations to maintain insurance that we aren't aware of and aren't managing. Two different broad buckets: process improvements and risk management. Process improvement, it's important to think about where the pain is for your organization and where the benefits are going to be derived. So there are really two kinds of process improvements when we look at the contracting process: pre-execution, that is before the contract signing, and post-execution after the contract signing. Here we have a timeline of our contracting process. On the far left, we have the contract execution process. We're focused on negotiation. We're agreeing to individual terms and concepts of that contract and assembling that into a final agreement that theoretically we're going to sign. Whether that's one document or many, doesn't really matter. We're talking about getting the terms right and negotiating the language of that, getting the business and financial terms correct, and then getting that ready to be executed. And then once we have signed it or executed the contract, which you'll see here, we then have a very different process. The terms have been agreed upon, and now we have to tend to that contract. We don't want it to be filed and forgotten. We need to calendar important dates, of which there are many in most commercial contracts. We have tasks and work that need to be assigned and managed and completed during the entire life of the contract. And then we need to gracefully terminate the contract at the end of it. And many contracts, NDAs and non-disclosure agreements or confidentiality agreements are a common example. They have post-termination obligations that need to be taken care of, like destroying confidential information and notifying the other side, as an example. So managing that whole process, post-execution, and drafting upfront. In many organizations, in our experience, the weight of the process improvement need is on one side of this wall or the other. Rarely is there a need in both areas. And the need might be perceived in one place, but might actually exist in another. So properly diagnosing where your process improvement need is will drive the decisions you want to make about how to implement contract management and where most of your time and attention is spent in refining the process. From a risk management perspective, we want to reduce unexpected losses in the contract portfolio. This concept is not talked about often in contract management. Contract management literature is often focused, as I said earlier, on government contracts and also on the contracting process. But the greater financial risk is in unenforceable or invalid contracts or terms or provisions or not complying with the terms and provisions of our contracts. Most organizations and contract managers and lawyers, for that matter, think of contracts in an isolated context. We are looking at a single contract. Is it well drafted? Is it not? Is it enforceable? Is it not? The problem for the contract manager is They are dealing not with an isolated contract, but they are dealing with many contracts. They are dealing with this idea of a contract portfolio. And there can be risks at an individual contract level that may not exist at the portfolio level, and vice versa. There may be risks that are small on an individual contract basis, but are quite large when they are aggregated into the entire portfolio. So when we think about contract management as a risk management function, we need to categorize our contracts, analyze and understand them in the appropriate buckets, and get a handle on managing that risk. We'll talk more about this later in the course, but for now, what's important is this is primarily a post-execution problem. We're dealing with contract compliance and management after the contract is secured. Most organizations think about risk management solely as getting the drafting language correct. You can do that 100% and still generate a tremendous amount of risk in the contract portfolio because the terms you agreed to still need management after execution. What are the benefits of contract management? Why do we bother to do this? There are only three that probably matter to your senior management team if you're trying to justify contract management. Number one is you want to grow revenue. Number two, you want to reduce expenses, which would allow you to do number three, expand your margins or profitability. And contract management can help with all of those things. When we talk about growing revenue, the green bars on the left, we're using contracts to allow us to sell more product or services. We might do that by being more efficient in the contracting process. So if you can turn around sales deals faster, then you are helping to close more business, you're growing top-line revenue. Or maybe you are including provisions in your contract that allow you to raise prices or that allow you to take advantage of market conditions such that you can command more revenue per contract deal. Conversely, you might have an opportunity to reduce expenses. And expenses can come from two places. They can come from expected expenses, where the contract is requiring you to spend money, but maybe by managing your entire contract portfolio holistically, you can get better pricing from organizations. That would be an expected loss that you can control or reduce. And then the risk management benefit of unexpected loss reductions. So dealing with the unenforceable or invalid contract or the term that is being exploited against you, and managing that allows you to reduce both expected and unexpected losses and improve profitability. And that's what we have in the blue bars. The stuff of heroes is the ability to have an increase in overall profitability. Most organizations see contract management as a cost center, as an administrative task, but in fact, you can turn it around into being strategically and financially valuable to your organization by thinking about it and talking about it and justifying it in terms of growing revenue, reducing expenses, and expanding profitability.